Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. What do truckers really want? Well, we're going to unpack that in here just a moment with my guest here. We have David Hollis, editor of Trucker News. David, welcome to the Hot Seat.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Spencer. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm very excited to learn all that you have to share with us in our time together here. But before we do that, would you take just 30 seconds or so and tell us about the work that you're doing over there at Trucker News?
Right. Truckers News has been around, well, in its second incarnation. It used to be a print publication. Then it was in retirement for a while, and I joined back 8.5 years ago when it came out as a website. And it is a website and also a daily newsletter, which we circulate to 40,000 primarily company drivers. So our focus is on the men and women who are working for the major for-hire trucking companies. We circulate strictly on the web and also on social media like everybody else, and have a very engaged, very vocal readership. We post a lot to our social media accounts, and generally they get very well responded to. So I think that we have a very engaged readership, and based on the findings of our recent survey that we did, a veteran and a very truly professional group of drivers who are involved with Truckers News.
Well, let's dig in there a little bit. So, first of all, let's talk about this series that I teased out in terms of what truckers want here. What was the inspiration behind this survey, and what did it entail?
Well, we have done this survey for several years now. I'm going to guess that this is about the fourth or fifth one that we've done. And we do it in conjunction with our sister publication, Overdrive, whose focus is on owner-operators. So we had response from over 800 truckers. Majority of them, almost 600 of them, are company drivers, and the others are leased owner-operators. It really is an attempt to find out what drivers want, what's on their mind, and we cover a lot of territory, a lot of different questions, and I think response of 800 truck drivers who are very busy, have a lot to do in their day. I think that's pretty good. If you look at them, 53% are over-the-road drivers. 69% of them have been driving for 20 or more years. So you can see that this is a very veteran core of drivers, just like it's pretty representative of the drivers out there today. 72% are 55 years old or older. So the respondents skew a little bit higher than the typical average age of drivers. And they're hard workers. They're over 50% drive 100,000 miles a year. And these are solidly middle-class incomes. 53% earned over $75,000 in the previous year. So that's kind of a snapshot of who responded.
Well, I think what's fascinating about the data that you're going to share with us is that obviously this is such a high sensitivity point for your carriers, because I think for probably up until 2022, the ATRI's top 10 issues, driver recruitment or driver retention, one and the same. It's either the one or two top issues. So obviously it's top of mind. We've seen record pay increases as part of a possible solve to get to the issue. Like, what do they want? But in the end, David, we're all guessing here. So in terms of it, there's no definitive answer about what it is. So when you asked and when you surveyed this group of 800 drivers, one of the things that you asked them is like, what would be the reason for a change? like that would change companies that you're working with. What did you learn from that question?
Well, uh, not surprising. Uh, Pay more pay was one of the big answers, but at the same time, it was interesting and I would say reassuring to hear that over 20% said that they would change jobs, they would switch carriers if the new one showed them that they appreciate the work I do and that they have a team atmosphere. And now that came up. I think it was Atri that did a survey of younger drivers, and they were the ones that were looking for that team atmosphere. Uh, but certainly, pay is top of mind for drivers. 35% said that they would make a change strictly for pay.
Yeah, and another thing that I thought was pretty interesting that probably not surprising, but I think it's relevant in terms of how does it weight as far as the other priorities. This 14% that wanted more home time, and so I think that like what we see trucking companies doing is if there's ways for them to kind of engineer their networks in a way that allows them to deliver on that promise more reliably, that can have a huge impact as far as their ability to recruit and retain drivers. So again, I think that this is what's so fascinating about your information. We have some assumptions that in some cases may be right, but when you look at, how they prioritize these needs, it really provides some evidence for leadership teams across America in the trucking spaces to go activate real solutions that can help their businesses. So again, I think that's great.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to you mentioned home time. Um, Fully a quarter of respondents said that we asked them how their work life balance had changed, improved since 2019, pre-pandemic to now, and 44% said that it hadn't changed. But 25%, no, which I think is significant, said that they were home more often, which I think really speaks to your point that that carriers are listening and are trying to make adjustments for their drivers.
So another thought stat that I thought was particularly interesting that kind of went against some of my assumptions, which is this 2% that they would change for a sign-on bonus. I'm curious, do you think that is representative of the whole industry? Based in terms of the shifting that we've seen, are 2% making that change based on the signing bonus alone? And if so, what does that inform other carriers about how they should consider their recruiting policies?
Well, I think, and this is kind of anecdotal, is that a lot of drivers have said that they're less interested in that sign-on bonus than they are in a higher pay rate. Build it into
Right.
to my regular pay. However, you've seen a lot. I've seen a lot anyhow, and I'm sure that you have too. A lot of carriers who are creating incentives for, call it better behavior, better safety records, clean inspections, mileage, improved miles per gallon. I've seen a number of companies that have created incentives for improved mileage. And, with diesel inching back up again, it only makes sense that they do that.
No, I think that's great. So what are like for the folks that you connect with that are on the ownership side? What are some things? What are some ways that you're seeing them apply this data that you're revealing to the marketplace?
Well, I think that um, if you look at what carriers do and say, um, they're really trying to accommodate drivers. I've seen a number of them that have gone to guaranteed pay, which I think is a big thing for drivers, that they know that their weekly bills are going to be paid, that they, even if they're stuck in traffic or they're stuck in bad weather for a day or they have a breakdown, they're still going to cover their responsibilities at home. And I think that's one thing that a lot of carriers have done to really create some reassurance for drivers that they are going to be taken care of regardless. And it's those are things that are out of their control, just like detention time is as well. Um, I think there is a greater awareness of just the corporate culture being more driver centric, creating a dispatch culture and a driver manager culture that is more pro driver than it is. Get that load there now. That it's more understanding of the driver. Um, we've seen a lot of that change during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic. I think that it still continues, but anyhow, a lot of drivers rate that corporate culture as pretty solid. And so I think that companies are paying attention and that they're listening to drivers more, well, driver centric. Let me say that.
No, I think that's great stuff. So, what advice would you give to the the ownership teams that are doing their best to listen to the data? Like, how can they take steps to improve? Because obviously, it's always a resource crunch. It would be nice if you could pay them whatever they want and you could provide most home time. So, what advice would you give them as far as taking this, whatever step you can take? How do you go about doing that to lean in and at the very least demonstrate that there's a sincere effort to hear what the drivers actually want?
Well, I think first and foremost is that, is to listen. Uh, a lot of companies have driver councils, and they're talking to their drivers. You know, you hear a lot that we have an open door policy that drivers can come in and talk. Well, make good on that. Really, not just listen, but then take it the next step and then solve the issue. Uh, and it's more than just a message over the messaging system. It's you know here's what's happening. We've seen so many times that there have been major changes within companies that drivers hear about secondhand or in on the road scuttlebutt from other drivers. And these when there's change, uh, the driver should know as much as possible as soon as possible. I think that companies and these are a lot of these are very big operations, and those things are like you know making a quick change with an aircraft carrier. You don't do that quickly, and I think that that's some of the things that because of the size of some of these companies that it's a little hard to do that. But I think any effort that these companies can make to communicate and communicate honestly and heartfelt in a heartfelt way, so that drivers really understand that it's coming straight to them. I think that's important. I think that drivers need to feel appreciated more than just during National Driver Appreciation Week. Uh, it needs to be an ongoing thing, and I think we've seen a lot of companies that are doing that, that are doing more recognition. I think I'm sure you follow companies on Facebook just like I do. And I think that we've seen a lot more recognition of drivers who are, and it doesn't have to be big things. It can be as modest as a clean DOT inspection. and they're getting praised and recognized for that, which I think is important because those are ongoing things that a lot of people might take for granted, but they're especially important to the driver. And I think that the more that they can do that, the better. But again, it needs to be really honest and forthright.
Well, let me pivot just a little bit. Kind of where our worlds intersect a little bit is that there's high sensitivity around M&A about the remaining career life of these drivers. I mean, obviously, there's sensitivity around driver shortage, but if the average age of a driver pool is 60 years old versus another acquisition candidate, which might be 45 years old, they look at that very differently in terms of the stability of the organization. Back to the actual survey, I'm curious, were there any takeaways as far as season of life or age of the drivers that demonstrated different needs, different wants about what they want from their driving experience?
Yeah, I think that the survey found that younger drivers, and these are, below 30, let's say, uh, are more interested in the corporate culture of being involved, knowing what's going on, um, being a team player, if you will. Uh, a lot of the older drivers, they want to drive, get from point A to point B, and then get home. I think that um, there's a real interest in younger drivers in having a career path, that there's something beyond the steering wheel, possibly for many of them. And I think that work life balance is important. I think that is something that we're seeing even outside of the trucking industry, is that younger employees are looking to be good employees during the workday, but they want to be able to go home and turn off and be their own person after that. And I think that we're seeing some of that as well. Um, I think there's also a response to pay. I think that younger drivers are fully aware of the need for pay. They want to be paid well, um, but I think it's of less importance um, than it is for older drivers. I think they probably have fewer responsibilities, so that they can afford to say, "Well, I'm gonna take this job at this pay rate now because I don't have the financial responsibilities of, say, like an older driver with a family and a mortgage and car payments, etc." So, I think it's interesting to see um, the changing dynamic of the driver pool. Let's face it, a lot of these guys, and they were, this came up in the survey. A lot of the respondents were older drivers, and and honestly, they want to keep driving. Uh, Retirement is out there, but it's not a top of mind kind of thing for a lot of these drivers.
No, I think I mean, that distinction between the two, I think is really important for, the leaders in our industry watching this, that they can't, it's not a one size fits all. They have to get in there and think about what are the unique needs and what actually is meaningful to them. Um, Now, I'm going to shift a little bit, David, into our last kind of wild card question here. Now, we did a little research on you, sir. We understand that you're an author, uh, wrote a book in the past, national to national, kind of a story in the equestrian world. My question is, are there any other books that are in the works that we should be aware of, sir?
Oh, like everybody, everybody that has a keyboard in front of him. There's I'm gonna write this as a book someday, and I have a couple of novels started. There's one that really I can't let go of. It's an idea. It was a terrible, terrible blizzard in 1913 occurred on the Great Lakes, and it was the greatest loss of life of ships that went down on the Great Lakes during this terrible storm, and that is kind of keeps rattling around in my brain as the possibility of something to write about. I've done a lot of research on it. I grew up in Michigan, not far from Lake Huron. My dad sailed on a freighter during the Depression for a season, and so it's one of those things that just keeps kind of nagging at me. And so if I find time or make time to do that, I'll probably put my hand to that eventually.
Well, I love it. I'm in. I'm in. I'll buy it. So but you take that as a little nudge to keep that pen to paper, and who knows what might happen. But listen, Dave, I really appreciate you taking the time to educate our network about what drivers want. And I just want to encourage you, keep up doing the great work at Truckers News. And we just want to thank you for being on the hot seat. That's going to do it for us. We'll see you next time.